Welcome back to a new episode. This is the Caddyshack podcast. This is episode number 10, and I think it's the last time I'm going to do this because I've run out of fingers. But we'd like to, kind of kick things off, keep the show going. We've always talked about like the what, maybe the how, but now we're starting to apply it to special situations and other people's kind of lessons learned. And so, with that, like always, we'll kick it off with a little bit of what's going on currently. And Barlas, hand the torch to you. Just kind of like what's going on with Caddyshack. As we move into November and the holiday and reinvent season.
Yeah, it is reinvent season. Jessica, thanks for joining us. We're going to get into your conversation here in a minute, but yeah, thanks, Michael. So what we're going to do with this conversation is going to be nice and quiet, fast. Caddyshack. What is Caddyshack doing? We're doing a couple events at reInvent. Number one that I'm always proud of is that our members are going to be manning the partner booth from Tuesday through Thursday. So if you have any questions about Caddyshack or you want to learn a little bit more about how we help, what we do, we are at the APN partner booth, and we have different members joining from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day. Another thing that we're doing on Monday, it's oversold, so I can't invite anybody to it, but these are the type of events that we do. We're doing an event on Sunday night for members and AWS, and that is at the Mont Blanc store in the Venetian and right above registration. And we're going to be giving away Mont Blanc pens. We have a DJ, we have food, we have drinks. It's going on from 6 till 8:30 on Sunday night. It's going to be spectacular. I may or may not be dressed up as Darth Vader. We'll find out if my suit still fits. Feminine Tech coming up on Tuesday of reInvent. It's a combination of multiple partners coming together with their budgets to build out a event that is talking about how women in technology are game changers and what women have done what this year. Jessica Alexander, our guest today, is one of the leaders in the number of votes to be a part of that. So we do have a running leaderboard, which is Jessica Alexander, Ruba Borno, Rachel Mushawar, and Gil Newsom of Splunk. And we're going to have a great time at that 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Tuesday. Just a little bit of Caddyshack news. We are moving forward with our training. 6 hours of CAD training with certification is going to be available Q1 in New York City is where we're going to start the first one, 100 people at a time, one a quarter. And AWS is going to hopefully give us the full recognition of what that is. But you will be a certified CAD by Caddyshack. So that's another wonderful thing that we're doing. And don't forget fractional CADs, which is for awesome partners where we can help and advise your AWS journey. That's all I got. Off to you, Michael.
Yeah. That being said, let's get into the heart of the conversation. So I want to welcome our special guest, Jessica. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, again, when I started this journey with AWS 4 years ago, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I started looking out to well, who's doing it right? And it was pretty consistent that, there were several ISVs and SIs that I think had a lot of the right motions, were building a lot of the right programs with AWS, and certainly CrowdStrike always came to the top of the list. And I know, that's where I think I first met you. So just tell us a little bit about, your time at least there, and what you guys do, and we can probably get into a little bit more of what you've learned and how things have evolved over time.
Sure. Yeah, happy to share the journey. It was all about failing fast. Like you said, Michael, there wasn't a recipe book, there wasn't a playbook, and really the journey that we had with AWS was largely about building trust with them. I came to CrowdStrike for 3 reasons. George Kurtz, he and I had known one another for many years, worked together at McAfee, had sold against one another when he owned Foundstone and I was selling EI, digital security vulnerability scanners. And, so I knew that he's a perfectionist and a really amazing leader. And that CrowdStrike was a product that would disrupt the market and, be successful in providing value to customers. So those were really my two reasons for joining CrowdStrike back in 2016. And I had also spent a little bit of time in the Pacific Northwest, and I've always sold to very large companies, whether it be financial services in New York City, whether it be the media and entertainment companies in LA, and found myself in the Pacific Northwest looking for a customer to sell to, and knew I wanted to sell to Amazon and really get to know them and figure out, how does this big company work? Like, how do they make decisions? How do they decide whether or not to invest in things? And so really had this passion for working with Amazon. And those were the three reasons that I came to CrowdStrike, George. Really wanted to build out a relationship, a partnership with Amazon. And so we started on that in 2016. And the first thing I realized was we had a growing, spend with AWS, and didn't really have a strategic relationship with them from a customer buy side, and dug into that a little bit and realized there was this thing called the AWS Marketplace, and we could sell our products there. And that just started this sort of journey, really about building trust between our two companies. And I think if you look at the way Amazon likes to engage, it's all about the leadership principles. So really, we've from day one started out really understanding their leadership principles and building trust between our organizations. So
Spot on. I heard a lot of things that we constantly hear and reiterate, and whether it was your CEO like asking for it in executive sponsorship leadership, like I think most of us have realized is running the alliances or that partnership, it is about trust and building a relationship. I call it a friendship a lot of times, but without the executives kind of understanding, blessing it, leaning in, asking questions, it's really hard to kind of move the rest of the company in that direction. So I think that's a perfect background. I think there's also the other thing, knowing your company maybe today or then, but like this is different, right? Most people understood direct sales, understood maybe channel or reseller, distribution. This is not that. So obviously there's 8 years now in between, but like, how did that come about? How did the evolution of understanding how AWS fits into this go-to-market motion? What was that like?
Well, again, we were fairly far in our journey around the traditional partnerships that we used. So Dell, resellers, right? I mean, we'd always been doing that. So the cloud route to market was definitely different for us, and it required a different mindset. There was a lot of upfront work that needed to be done, right? It wasn't just a matter of like adding a partner object to Salesforce and, kind of figuring out what tier they were going to be in and then enabling them. It required a lot of engineering work. So obviously getting the AWS Marketplace and other cloud marketplaces integrated requires a lot of back-end engineering work. And so, that was an obstacle, right? And we engaged with Tackle further along in our journey to help accelerate that. So that was really piece one, is how do we get this build a business case for all the engineering work that we're going to need to do, even just to attach marketplace to our go-to-market. So really worked tightly with finance to understand what was important to them. Obviously, transaction speed, cost of sale was very important to finance. So we built a business case around that. All right, so let's not measure this in how many net new logos are we going to get and how many net new sourced opportunities. It was more around how do we operationally improve our own transactions so that we can take advantage of this go-to-market. So that was really like the first point that we used to build a case for getting executive leadership, especially from the finance team. Yeah. And then they became a big advocate for us. So it was a little unusual in that initially we had thought, well, we're going to get all these new customers, but really it was about operationally improving our own route to market.
Absolutely. And so, that kind of talks to and fits in a lot of the co-sell bucket, right? Because I think you found it, most people did. This isn't the field of dreams. If I put up a marketplace listing, it's maybe, but more so now, but certainly not the last few years. It was intentional, right? A lot of times it had to come up in the co-sell conversations, it had to come up into the interaction. So, what else did you learn, or what else, would you put into that co-sell stuff? Because I think you guys do, there's a lot of synergies that I see now, but certainly from, the inside that you learned or you prioritized in kind of that co-sell bucket.
Yeah, you make a great point, Michael, that we kind of put the marketplace listing up and said, oh, we built it. Now, will they come? Right.
Yeah.
So again, the onus and responsibility and the shared responsibility with AWS was, well, great. Now we have to go enable our salespeople and how to talk not only to AWS about what CrowdStrike does well, but talk to AWS about how CrowdStrike and AWS make our customers safer, happier, more capable of protecting themselves. So we really pivoted. We had this great marketplace listing, and we pivoted to taking an investment in how do we scale out this enablement, this message to our internal sellers. And so we formulated a tiger team. It was a very small team. We had the luxury of being able to hire specific resources. So the profile, and everybody knows Todd Crosley too, the profile we were looking for was someone who either was willing to get their AWS practitioner, cloud, certified practitioner certification. They had some knowledge of SaaS. They understood how to talk cloud services, right? Because we really needed to bridge that gap. So we started with 2 or 3 resources, sprinkled them across the Americas because that's where we were getting the most traction, and blossomed it from there. And it was like, great. Well, now we're enabling our sellers not only how to sell through the AWS marketplace and how to have that conversation around path to budget, speed of transaction, right? But now we're having this conversation around how does a CrowdStrike product make our customers more secure, our joint customers more secure. So we did that, and then realized that, there's not really like the glue in it. So we brought the cloud solution architects on board, and their job was to take this glue, right? To really take, well, how does a CrowdStrike product make an AWS service better? And so
solution architects from AWS or from CrowdStrike?
From CrowdStrike. So we hired specific cloud solution architects that could design using CloudFormation templates, services that a cloud practitioner would adopt and understand is, how do we make our products not just better for an AWS customer, but how do we make them easier to deploy? How do we make them easier to consume? So we had a further evolution where we had to take the actual CrowdStrike product, not just our messaging, and make it cloud friendlier. And so we really pivoted our journey to that, of having this sort of 3-legged stool. One was obviously AWS Marketplace, a place to buy. Then there was the messaging of, well, why does this matter to an AWS customer? And then the third component was, well, let's make it really easy for an AWS customer to consume.
This conversation's so easy for me because you are basically describing in an elegant way the acts of co-sell, co-build, and co-market. Right.
But can I ask you a quick question? Sorry to cut in, Michael. I'm just, like I said at the beginning, I'm the guy who cuts in a lot. So what you're describing is a perfect world, right? You got these SAs who are able to come in and help build your vision or the company's vision that you've helped created, to move that along where it's easier for AWS customers to do business with CrowdStrike. It's easier for CrowdStrike to do business with AWS. But the biggest question that I guarantee that every Cloud Alliance director who's listening to this is going to be, how did you convince a CrowdStrike to hire more partner solutions architects to help you with that, when so many of us have technical debt that they've got to go after? So many of us have, a resource of technology that, hey, I need to build my product, not build a better way to, work with AWS customers at this exact second. How did you get those resources? That's going to be a big question I know a lot of people are going to have.
Well, initially, remember our friends in finance, right? They were like, wow, this is awesome. Like, it's so much faster. We need to invest more in this. And so we use that momentum. We were always trying to gain momentum ahead of the next ask. So initially we were gaining momentum on let's get as many marketplace transactions as we can so that we can have this like operational excellence around speed and cost. And then that kind of carried us into, well, I think we can get more headcount, right? If this is something that's good and we're generating benefit here, let's get a couple more headcount. And we were always very intentional about what we asked for. We didn't ask for very many. It was like, just give me one, like, just give me one resource. And maybe I can borrow some resources from another team, right? I think that's probably the benefit we had was Crowdstrike had a technology alliances team that had some developers that were okay with coding for us, right? I mean, it wasn't this team initially, it was more, how could we find internal resources that were similar, at least to get like a proof of concept or like an initial version out the door that we could go put in market. And like I said, it was really about failing fast. And when we did succeed, really optimizing that, the messaging and getting resources. So.
Yep. And I can say from my standpoint, I wouldn't take this job unless I had a resource. So in my world, I already knew to be successful doing this, I would need at least a resource or later a team to help support that co-build stuff or these tweaks that probably would have to make that are not maybe integral to the product roadmap. And what I learned in my past was I never wanted to wait in the same line as where the customers are waiting or our sales team's waiting or the roadmap that the executive team's driving. And so I needed a way to augment that. So that's like in my case, I did that, but I just kind of knew that from doing other tech alliances. But what she said is correct, because had I have not, and even to this day, I tend to go try to find folks in the organization who are capable. You might find this in your field, sales engineering resources that are ex-developers or SREs, and now they're on the sales side, but they have like crazy skills to go do stuff. And there's a lot of teams early on, even in our journey, where we could actually go grab a bunch of people from other places. Sometimes it's in your services organization. And this is not nights and weekends, but they're looking for something new and cool and different to do, maybe to help the go-to-market, even though they're in a post-sales function. Or,
that's
there's just a
something that
lot
we
of ways,
do.
but that's just it. You have to, as a CAD, or even in our roles, I still think of us way more as BD than just like, until it matures and it's like I wake up every day and do co-sell or do this function. Early on, it's much more of a business development role. You're kind of like, you're trying to manage and build something without a lot of direct. So that's why you need execs to kind of help you get wider. You need to find creative ways to solve problems without, organizational hierarchy or power sometimes. And so, but I would say for everyone else that's trying to do it, it's not easy, but be creative. Like, just because you don't have someone doesn't mean I can't do it until I go get someone. You'll probably lose that argument. Many times you have to go figure it out, build the revenue, build the relationship with, like, build the momentum, and then the resources are much easier to ask for later.
Well, one of the things that, and this is going to be a shameless plug for awesome partners right there. One of the things, actually the thing that we always bring up with any relationship when we're starting a new one with consulting to get someone to the next level with AWS is to create a cloud center of excellence, a CCOE, right? So creating a CCOE, some people just think of that as, oh, that's nice to have. No, but you have to have that, because just like Michael was just saying, right, there's going to be people in other departments that worked in cloud before. There might be some technical folks that might have some resources and really love to do things, and they're just not being asked by their managers, but they have the time. And they might have even worked for AWS or one of the other hyperscalers. I don't know if there is any, but if there is one, maybe they worked at other ones, and they can help you with getting everyone rowing in the same direction. So that's why a CCO is just so important, because just because your CEO is telling you, no, I'm not going to give you the resources, you might already have them.
Yeah. Yep.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I was going to say. So actually, I mean, like I said, you're already, because you've been doing it. You're kind of connecting the building blocks together, but you did it in a very smooth way. So even in the beginning, or when you kind of wrapped around to what I call co-marketing, and so does AWS, you still were talking about what's the message, what's our better together, what's this, that. And so, with awesome partners and Caddyshack, we're constantly telling people, I kind of start there, right? Because it makes it a lot easier to train your reps, train their reps, and some of the other build. But in that case, what were your lessons learned? A lot of times I steal from Barless. He likes to call it your what is it? Your what's the thing that you help people build in the beginning, Barless?
Superpower statement.
Yeah, your superpower statement. So what have you learned for that? And I'm assuming that it's evolved over time as well as your platforms evolved, as the market's changed. What can you help others, like where do you start, like how do you get going, or why is that important?
Well, a lot of it has to do with and when I talk to other ISVs as they're getting started, it's really about, where are you platformed? Like where are you platformed, and what's the benefit to an AWS customer, right? Like why would an AWS customer be excited about your product? Does it make their life easier? Does it make it more cost efficient? Does it make it more secure, right? Like really figuring out those value statements. And I know we like to use Amazon's format for things. So we would always do a PR FAQ. Okay, so this new service integration, what's in it? What would AWS be excited about saying? Right? Oh, wow, it's one-click deploy. It's available in Systems Manager and super easy to spin up, right? So you can manage it from your AWS account. So I think those pieces, like having those internal discussions with the CEO, the CTO, getting the engineering and finance teams involved, and really having a collaborative discussion on how can AWS make our company different? How can it help us to grow and innovate? And I think that's the theme that excites me most, like even 7 years later. It's like, how is Amazon going to make us better today? Right? Whether it be as a customer, as a partner, as a whatever it may be, as someone we buy services from, right? Like, how are they going to make us better? And I'm always surprised. And I think that's the idea, is to keep that element of like, what amazing thing could we do today that would like really grow the business 5 years from now? And, like we referenced the $1 billion through AWS Marketplace, like we had line of sight on that. We were like, thank you. We were gunning for that, right? I mean, that was the goal. It wasn't to get $100. It wasn't to get $10,000, which were kind of like our increments when we first started with AWS Marketplace. No, the goal was $1 billion.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's the impact, that if you take like they say you can be, an inch off, but 5 years later, you'll be like, in a different country, right? Just that, like staying really close to them within inches as you move along this path, and really like leaning in, can make a huge difference 5, 6, 7 years down the road.
Yeah. And what I heard is what the common is we're talking about AWS, but if you're not built that way, your customers aren't buying that way, maybe your existing channel doesn't do, like, you can't shoehorn this thing into every business, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But the second thing that you definitely said is, this stuff is, well, I lost my train of thought, but for sure it's that, and I did catch the press release, and
Well,
I thought that was
can I jump
very
in since
impressive.
you've lost your train of thought, and I
Yeah,
like
go
to
for it.
interrupt because I'm so rude. It's the ADHD and autism and dyslexia all mixed together. But EBCs, did you guys do one?
EBC?
Executive Briefing Center, where you get everyone in room. This is something that I bring up a lot to companies that are just starting off, an EBC, but a real EBC, not just like, let's just rah and get a bunch of people. Like, think about it. Who do you want? Where do you want to be? And that's something that I tell every company in the first
But by
3 months.
EBC, are you meaning like in the AWS? I'm going up to Seattle. I'm getting in the briefing center. I'm setting up all the meetings and
Yes,
learning about.
all of those things, except it does not have to be in Seattle. It can also
Sure.
be in San Francisco, New York, Dallas,
Yeah.
Austin. They will fly if it's the right company. The last EBC I did when I was working at Amazon was in New York City. They like to do them during summits as well. So if you're heading to reInvent, Summit, whatever. And what I love about EBCs is there's this crazy guy who's part of the digital innovation team at AWS. His name's Jake Burns. He's a great guy, although he looks like Thor. So my wife is a little in love with him. He was the former CIO of Live Nation, and he's fantastic. And everyone I put this guy in front of doing a digital innovation program, he'll sit there and he'll create like, what if we did this? What if your customers did this in 5 years? What if you could say that you were the best at this 3 years from now? What would that do to your business? And he has the CEOs and the CROs sitting there salivating like, oh my God, we billionaires, this is so fantastic. And Thor just told me that I am going to be able to get there in 5 years. Wow. And then he builds a plan with everyone in the same room. Like, let's whiteboard this and work backwards. If you want to be here, how many deals do you have to get? From those, how many deals are going to be able to go through marketplace? What is that going to do for your relationship with AWS? What would you like it to do for your relationship with AWS? And every time I mention these, people look at me kind of sideways. They're like, yeah, that sounds good, but does that really happen? And I'm like, yes, it does. Is that the same experience that you had with CrowdStrike in the beginning? Was getting everyone in the same room, rowing in the same direction? I mean, I don't think Jake was there then, but it
Jeff
seems like it would be a
Barr,
good
Dave
fit.
McCann, right? I mean, we had the old guard, and to get the opportunity to brainstorm with someone like Dave McCann and Jeff Barr, and just the quality of
Oh, I love Jeff Barr.
visionaries, yeah, and innovation, and
Shout out to Jeff, because I'm sending this link directly to you after this, buddy.
oh, he's great. And to have that level of engagement with the executive staff, right? People come away from those EBCs really excited. And I think the sooner an ISV can get into that cadence of having those discussions and being held accountable to the things, the owners, the timelines, right? To have those EBCs every year and to say, well, we said we were going to be doing this. How did we get there? Did we miss some targets? And that's the other piece of engaging with Amazon that's really fun, is that there's no shame in a miss. There's no blame in, oh, it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. Like, it's more of a curiosity of how do we get there? Well, first of all, do we still want to get there? And secondly, okay, let's get there. Let's figure this out. So I think that's the other component too, is really keeping an open mind and holding one another accountable to what we've agreed to do. And then having these regular cadenced conversations, whether it be every year, right, with the executive staff, but quarterly with the team that's running the day-to-day operations. So I've just always found that too to be a very effective way to keep the executive team involved and somewhat held accountable, because we always kind of, during that year, we would go back to the EBC outputs and say, hey, CXO, you agreed to help us do XYZ, and we want to deliver on that for our next EBC. And, so it was a good way to sort of pull in the executives to be held accountable and to help and to support what we had decided to do together.
Yeah, I think,
and just so you guys know, that's
Yeah.
Jake Burns right there. If anyone listening has a EBC that you're doing, that is your guy. Can you see my screen? Yeah,
I can. I see
good.
Jake.
Yeah,
What a cool.
Yeah,
So-
actually, that whole AWS enterprise strategy team is all awesome. They're all ex CXOs. Yeah, they're all pretty cool.
yeah. Jake is phenomenal, and he's such a great guy, and he lives in Vegas. Sorry, Jake, I'm giving all your information, but I'll send this to you. But vice president of cloud services for Live Nation for 9 years. This is a guy to know. Like, he is your guy. If you talk to him about stuff, he has the best ideas. Like, I learned so much. Just like when I get on the phone with you, Jessica, I learned so much from this guy every time I get on the call. So just so
So
everybody knows.
just to whittle it back, because you said PRFAQ, you've said these things where you're kind of setting future goals and you're backing into them, and you're taking a mile and you're like, well, really it's like, 3,000 something feet. Like, can I do a foot? Then can I do the next foot? I've even heard, I've never done one, but like AWS also calls these like envisioning workshops, and they'll work with you guys. So I think like the message here is like, if you're not talking to your PDM, if you're not asking about these things, like they're not always going to do them for everyone all the time, but you might find something where maybe it's not, Adam Slepsky and the CEO of AWS, but you're going to find folks that will help you, kind of put your ideas on a whiteboard, in a 6-page or a couple-page narrative, or at least think about what you want the press release to look like. Think what you want the outcome to look like, and then, well, I'm here and that's there. Like, what are the things that we can do? What are the angles that we can't? And I think you're right. Again, I think most people know this, but for me, it's sometimes putting my executives who don't work for me. I kind of work for them, with them, but it's also getting them and their opinions out and in the open. And then once they're out there, you're right. You even said that it's a way, not how can I hold them accountable, but we've kind of agreed to this stuff, and maybe we're, a few inches off from where we expected to be. Like, what could we do differently? And while we're even talking about our own companies, the reality is you got someone on the AWS side who's kind of offering and sometimes doing the same things. Well, if you want to get to here, here's also the other thing. And it still blows my mind. I mean, AWS had their quarterly reports. We're talking about a company that's now over a $90 billion runway, which is just insane to me. But it's still, for many of us, it's a supplier. We build on their infrastructure, and it still blows my mind that you could be consuming their services, and yet, it's in it for them too, but they're actually can help you grow your business. They can help you innovate. They can help you, attract more customers, get branding out there, get press out there, do a lot of things. And that's unique in any industry. Like, it's not like I buy steel from someone in the steel companies, like helping me grow my business. Like, it doesn't always work that way in other industries. So it's still very unique, but I think I heard a lot of those. And we mentioned, these EBCs, envisioning, where like that's stuff you could be talking to your PDMs with your friends at AWS, just to understand what they are, but ask for these. And then it's a good coalesce your own company around with people at AWS to work backwards on goals that you're trying to achieve in your partnership, or just your revenue, your company's goals.
Yeah. I think that's very well said. So we've talked about the EBCs. We've talked about getting everyone together, the co-sell, the co-marketing. We're coming up on the end of the time that we would have, so people aren't bored. But Jessica, I know a lot of people reach out to you, ask you about, why, how, what you're doing. If you were back 7 years from now, I got 2 questions, and then I'll shut up for the rest of the time. Maybe if you went back 7 years and you were starting this all over again, is there anything that you would do different with the knowledge that you have today? That's question number 1. And question number 2, which falls almost in the same question, but a little bit different. If you were a startup CEO and you were wanting to get to a place where Crowdstrike is 7 years later, what is the one thing that you would 100% prioritize? So those are my 2 questions.
So if I were to be starting,
and I don't mean to put you on the spot, because I know I sent you the questions beforehand and those weren't part of it, but
2 things. The consumption billing model, right, is an interesting change and shift for ISVs. You're either kind of selling annual SaaS contracts, which AWS customers are fine with. But there's a consumption component too that I think is really fascinating. And obviously AWS is the master of consumption-based contracts, right? So I think I would intentionally figure that out early on in the cycle. Like, how do we have a consumption-based product and that will provide us with some predictable ARR growth, right? That kind of, how would that impact the company? And then secondly, really around integrating with the core services that customers use, kind of starting that from day one. Like, it's just automatically something that's in these 10 AWS services, or, that really ease of adoption. Because I think, and this is kind of where I try and counsel the ISVs that have the opportunity to be new at this and maybe don't have a lot of tech debt and don't have they can take more risk, right? Is to say, really figure out how you can get to that sort of automated customer adoption, without having to do private offers and annual contracts, and like really figure out that self-service component. That's the piece that I would really like to, like, if I get to do it all over again, that would be really fun, is to figure out how to really master self-service.
And what about the one thing as a CEO you would prioritize right now over everything else?
Self-service.
That's it. Self-service.
Yeah.
Got it.
How do I make this so that customers find our product and they just buy it and it grows and they love it, and we can engage with them on what do we do to make the product better, but the mechanics of them finding it, adopting it, growing it are somewhat automated.
And you would 100% recommend Marketplace?
It's the best, right? I mean, it's the most prevalent. People have contracts and spends tied to it, right? I mean, if that would be the component that would be super exciting, is how do you really master that so that you can eliminate or, shift the cost of go-to-market to other areas, and really, like, maybe you get to shift a lot of your go-to-market to customer success and really innovating around how you interact with your customer, right? There can just be more investment there.
From what I heard and what I know, those are astute, and they're really hard to move your company if that's not how it was started.
Yeah.
So if you weren't built on a consumption-based billing contracts, it's the same that if you weren't built as a SaaS company and you're trying to become a SaaS company, I've worked, it's hard. It has nothing to do with the tech. It's just business mindset. It's really hard to do. So even going from SaaS and that billing to consumption, that's a leap too. So I do agree with that. And the whole PLG, product-led growth, again, like, how quickly and fast and easy can I get it into their hands? How can I make billing simple? How can I make the deployment simple? And then you're right, like, I've been saying this actually this week a lot, the closer you can make your developers to your customers, fail fast, iterate fast, whatever it is, you end up, in a lot of companies, the wider that gets, sometimes you're not always building the right thing for your customers. And, right now in this current economic time, like, happy customers are the best route to your next customer. And so I think, it's definitely, it's all very true. It's true for most of us, but I'm just another opinion. I see it every day now to those things.
Well, I heard an interesting concept on a podcast that I like to listen to. It's called Scaling Revenue, or it's Scaling something. And he had the gentleman on from, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name, but he was exploring the idea of community-led growth as opposed to product-led growth. And I just
love that.
Right. It would be really fun to have the opportunity to explore, how do we create this self-service experience that is really driven by a community of users. And so that would be like my dream thing, is my dream opportunity would get to be to do that.
Yeah, I would say there's other Caddyshack members that work at software companies I think have done a really good job at that. Certainly Laura at Datadog, the team at Sneak. There's ones where they've come really close to the developers and they've built these huge developer communities, and it's just driving a lot of the purchase, acquisition, trials, and I think that's pretty neat.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we're coming to the end. We don't want to bore too many people that are listening to this on their flight over from New York to San Francisco, which is probably where they're listening to this at this moment. Michael, you want to end us up and close us out?
Yeah, no, I just want to thank guests. Thanks everyone for joining the show. Jessica, it's been awesome to have you and just kind of dig into, the evolution. I think you've been doing this just as long as most people, just kind of figuring it out. So thank you again. Any final words, or even if I just kind of put you on the spot, like real quick, like what are the top three? Like what are the three lessons learned that you give back, for how to build your partnership with AWS?
Sure. Start now. Start small. And use external resources if you can't get internal budget, right? Like these lovely resources at Caddyshack, and there's a lot of people in the network and community who've been doing this a long time, and to build the initial business plan. So start now, start small, and use your extensive network and resources.
And that's gold advice right there. So thank you to everyone. And I think that wraps episode number 10.
Thank you.